America's center of power changed, and with it, the dynamics of the political landscape. The consequences will reverberate locally, in Florida, on Capitol Hill, and on the global stage. Voters demanded change on the issues that mattered most: the economy, immigration, and social issues. Now, News4JAX goes beyond the headlines with political analysts who provide unique context and perspective. Experts focused on the issues making headlines. This is Politics and Power.
You know, it's interesting. Even before her memoir hit bookstore shelves, Kamala Harris's account of her abbreviated presidential run, it burned a lot of bridges. 107 days is the former VP's account of the 15 weeks that she spent on the campaign trail. It is rife with criticism. Critical of prominent Democrats, including California Governor Gavin Newsom, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and even former President Joe Biden. So much criticism that some political strategists thought maybe it was her swan song from politics. Others say maybe not so much, and maybe the message in the book was, hey, losing the election wasn't my fault, and I may yet run. Welcome to Politics and Power. I'm Bruce Hamilton with political analyst Daniel Cronrath. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Bruce.
So, Daniel, recently Harris has been downplaying the criticism and trying to turn the attention away from those squabbles with the members of her own party. What she's been trying to do instead is turn the focus squarely on the man who beat her in the 2024 election, President Trump. In fact, that's why she says she wrote the book, to remind people that there's somebody in the White House who made promises, and these are her words from a recent interview, that they were either about what would aggrandize and help him mete out his vengeance, or about lies he told to the American people that he obviously never intended to keep. Possible that there's a short-term and long-term agenda here?
Well, Bruce, the first agenda of anyone writing a book is to make money. Let's put that out there. Whether it's former FBI Director Comey, whether it's Kamala Harris, whomever it is, this is what you do when either you win or lose an election, inevitably in our politics.
And keep your name in the public.
And you keep your name and you get anticipation coming out. You know, the second thing I would say is I wouldn't want any of your viewers to think that they're missing some Hunter S. Thompson fear and loathing on the campaign trail kind of material here. It is, by the numbers, pretty much a typical political recap of what you're going to see. Obviously in a historic election, the nature of which Vice President Harris got into the race, the obstacles that she confronted, which she does lay out in the book, that were challenges to her that honestly, Bruce, no candidate in the modern campaign has had to deal with. But in terms of breaking anything new, probably not. Most of the things in here seem to be things that we've already known about President Trump. I think one of the things that we could tease out today was some of the conversations that she had, first of all, about how she was interacting with the Biden administration itself and President Biden and family. And second of all, was what went into her calculations in terms of choosing her vice president, and what did that look like as well. And I think some of the other notable outcomes of the book are just generally, things that you wouldn't necessarily need to buy the book to understand. The fatigue that goes along with campaigning, the wearing down, the raw emotion. And I mean whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat, if you've been on a race at the local, state, or federal level and you have put 110% of it, there is an emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion which takes place, which she also reflects upon in the book.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the agenda, if you will, in just a bit, but talk about some of the interesting takeaways in 107 days. Apparently there was a deep fracture in the partnership between Biden and Harris. To hear her tell it, there were perceived slights, mistrust. She talks about something that happened on July 4th in the memoir and recounts calls for Biden to withdraw starting to mount. The president's wife pulled Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, the first husband, aside and asked, "Are you supporting us?" So the question provoked a furious outburst from her telling, from Emhoff in private. And he says, "They hide you away for 4 years and still they have to ask if you're loyal." Now, that's quite different than what we saw publicly. That kind of exchange surprise you?
No, not at all. I mean, I think it's quite a bit of stagecraft. I think that when you go back through American history, Bruce, there have been all kinds of partnerships that we would assume that the president and the vice president were closely working together, when in fact they didn't have any real kind of personal relationship at all. And I think that you really see in this case, one of the things which I've noticed in a lot of our politics today, Bruce, is kind of this idea of projection. The Bidens questioning the loyalty of Emhoff and of Kamala Harris to execute an agenda for the president to get reelected. What about that honesty flowing in reverse and them not fully disclosing to the rest of the Democratic Party and to the vice president the condition and the state that President Biden was in? One of the things she talks about in the book that she claims today, what I find almost unbelievable to Bruce, is that she said from the policy end during the day, President Biden was fine. The only things that he was having problems with was the campaign-related issues and the political issues. Bruce, it doesn't work like that. Cognitive decline does not work like that. You don't remain sharp in one aspect and not have that of your life and job and not have that impact who you are as a person. And then lastly, I think the other thing that passage is very illuminating to me was the coverage that Jill Biden was running for her husband, Joe, the entire time. Behind the scenes, making sure that Joe was okay, controlling a narrative, controlling individuals who she thought was going to be threatening to her husband. And by the way, Bruce, we saw this all the way out the door, all the way to the very, very end of his presidency. Even comments that she had made that she thought he was run out of the race, okay? This is after the American people saw the deterioration which was taking place with President Biden in front of our own very eyes.
There's this assumption that the vice president is important to the administration anyway. The vice president on the campaign trail is often seen as inconsequential, and to the administration is inconsequential. Can't wait to see J.D. Vance's book.
Well,
and
again, I would argue that is the administration per se. I mean, we can just, since we have a little time, we can take a walk back through history. Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, classically, they had a bitter campaign in 1980. Despite the fact that Bush was a two-term vice president for Reagan and was eminently qualified, they did not get along. They would both tell you that they were not, they had respect for one another, but they weren't close. Reagan was handing off big policy chunks to Bush. You then get into the relationship with Al Gore and with Bill Clinton. After the Bush administration with Dan Quayle, and of course Dan Quayle famously is the vice president everybody quickly forgets. But then you get into the Clinton and Gore administration, and you do see a working partnership. You see Clinton tasking Gore, for example, with reforming government, making government more efficient. You get into the 2000s, and again, I don't think this is going to sound controversial. How many people at the time, Bruce, thought we had a President Cheney, that he was really the one, particularly when the United States was on a post-9/11 war footing, and we were actively engaged in the military in Iraq and in Afghanistan, that Vice President Cheney was running the show. Then you get into the Obama administration, and by the way, this should not come as a shock to anybody. Biden and Obama got along okay, but Biden, I mean, this is
didn't do
well,
much
no, and the Obama
policy-wise,
people frequently made fun of Biden. His IQ, his ability to manage a government. He was kind of
put his foot in his mouth all the
Yeah,
time.
put his foot in his mouth, gaffes galore, you know. So when the point of it is that every one of these relationships is going to be different. I would say moving forward, you're probably going to see J.D. Vance take even a bigger role in public.
Do you think that's why he's so vocal now?
I think that this is going to be an ongoing thing. I think that there's an active plan here for J.D. Vance to make him...
They're grooming him.
To become the next president of the United States, become their preferred nominee. I think this is his opportunity to win that slot.
Because the Democrats don't have anybody in the bullpen.
Well, we can talk about the Democrats.
That's a whole other show.
Yeah, well, it's a whole other show. But I think that relative to that, I think that's why you're seeing J.D. Vance right now publicly take a lead on the budget bill and whether or not we're going to be having a government shutdown. By the time we're recording this, maybe they will have already reached an agreement. However, J.D. Vance is very, very much out in front, leading on that issue, to the extent that over the weekend, over the news, if you heard a lot of President Trump's comments, as communicated from Representative Jeffries and Senator Schumer, President Trump wasn't completely even aware what was in the budget bill completely. It was being clarified for him by people who were in the meeting. So I think you're seeing what is going to become an inevitable turn even further to J.D. Vance being involved in this government.
Right, back to Kamala Harris.
Yeah, sorry.
There's another chapter in the book where, as she tells it, she received a call from President Biden hours before she was set to debate Trump in a pivotal moment in her own campaign when Harris apparently got a call from Joe Biden. She says Biden asked her to, quote, rewrite the history of his own disastrous debate. We all know how that went. It was obvious that was going to come up in the Trump-Harris debate. There was no doubt about that. But are you surprised that Biden would do something like that so close to a crucial moment for Harris?
Well, I think it's... Yes and no. Ideally, you wouldn't want to have somebody coming in at the 11th hour to inject that much kind of a lack of confidence and or that kind of mandate prior to you actually going on the TV.
Because her focus is on the debate.
Whatever you have done, whatever you prep for, whatever you and your team have come together in this debate prep. Oh, by the way, in the last 4 hours, I want you to go out and basically defend what a terrible job I did in front of the American people and find a way to elegantly explain that away. That, by the way, Bruce, I haven't been able to explain it away. Now I want you to go out there.
He tried to explain it away, saying that he'd just been on this overseas trip and he was tired and blah, blah, blah,
somebody
blah.
gave him an Ambien and all kinds of other things. But I mean, it was a disastrous appearance. So, yeah, I mean, she had to bear that. She had to bear the responsibility of being able to have to go out there and do that. She had to also, Bruce, at the same time, she took on the responsibility of having to defend some of the worst parts of President Biden's record. That was another thing that was communicated in this book, was the unwillingness of the Biden administration from letting Vice President Harris untether herself to what had taken place during the 4 years. But she had to be a lockstep soldier in that.
Well, she couldn't do it. There's the hand grenade moment, as they called it on The View, which we'll get to later in the show. I'm getting ahead of myself. Without mincing words, in 107 days. And I'm just talking about the book here. Harris also says it was reckless for Biden to run for a second term. There are a lot of people who say that. There are a lot of people who say that he should have. Joe Biden always wanted to be president, okay?
Yes.
There's no secret about that. And there are a lot of people who say that Joe Biden should have, after he'd been elected, said, you know what, I got what I wanted, and you know, now that I'm in the White House, I'm going to groom somebody else to go ahead and, you know, succeed me.
Yes, yes. Unfortunately for Joe Biden, that person was never going to be Kamala Harris. They were never particularly close. When he ran the first time, Kamala Harris was placed onto the ballot to satisfy a perceived demographic need of that campaign. They wanted to have an African-American woman on the ticket in order to balance out Biden's ticket. Well, then, when you're looking for a transition plan, your obvious choice is to transition somebody who is currently your vice president. However, it was never somebody that President Biden had a very close relationship with. The other thing that we have to look at, I'm kind of surprised that, not really surprised, but it's a factor to remember. When Kamala Harris ran as her own candidate in 2020 for president of the United States, she was historically unliked. Yeah. She didn't make the Iowa caucus because her fundraising had dried up. And in poll testing and other events that she had with people, she had no, no kind of gravitas that she was actually collecting or connecting with the people that no cachet. She wasn't connecting with the average voter in that regard. So when you're looking at the Biden administration and you're saying, okay, here's my own legacy, I'm still walking around with this in my mind that the only person who can beat Donald Trump is me, Joe Biden, because that was something else he said. He had confidence in nobody else to beat Donald Trump other than the guy who beat him the first time. And there's where things, I think, Bruce, on a really, really human level become kind of sad to me.
Right.
And it is not being aware and not having people close enough to you to let you know, hey, that Joe Biden that beat Donald Trump 3.5 years ago, that's not the same guy anymore.
It was not the same Joe Biden.
It's not the same guy anymore.
And in fact, she says that, Joe Biden was in denial about it. His inner circle was in denial about it. There were a lot of people who, didn't feel the way that they should have about Joe Biden and running for a second term.
Except sadly, if you're a Democrat or even somebody who's just caring, except sadly for his inner circle and a lot of elite media in the United States. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember individuals, because it's a popular show, I still think, with a lot of Democrats, Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough. Joe Scarborough coming out right before that debate or after the debate saying this was the best version of Joe Biden what we've ever seen. Well, we've all read The Emperor's New Clothes, Joe Scarborough. This is not the best version of Joe Biden that we've ever seen. Corinne Jean-Pierre, his press secretary, who had to go out there, talk about a skilled press job, being Corinne Jean-Pierre and trying to protect the Biden administration during those last days with where the president was at. It was all a disaster. And it was to the point of today's conversation, a lot of it was the brunt that had to be borne by the vice president.
I think the one person that could have changed Joe Biden's mind was Jill Biden, and she was in denial too.
Yeah, well, for sure, as well as his kids and his inner family. There's no question about it. And his son, Hunter, who for whatever reason, even before that election, he, despite his kind of, to be kind, Bruce, tabloid past, he was even inserting himself in the commentary of the race. What are you affecting it positively at that point?
He should have stayed in the background. Because of those tabloid headlines.
In the background. Well in the background.
All right, when politics and power continues, the struggle over Harris choosing a running mate, that hand grenade moment that I alluded to on The View, and why she called President Trump disarmingly flattering. Kamala Harris said that President Trump was disarmingly flattering in private. Where do you hear that one? It's in the book. Stay with us. Appreciate you staying with us on Politics and Power, talking about VP Kamala Harris's divisive new book, 107 Days. So another interesting takeaway includes the fact that Tim Walz, Minnesota's governor, was not her first choice to be her running mate. Who did Harris want? Pete Buttigieg. She called him the ideal partner. What got in the way?
Well, I think the fact, if you both privately and if you read the book, it was concerns about being our first openly gay cabinet secretary and what kind of impact that was going to have a gay man, one who was proudly out, one who had a husband, who had adopted a child, having that person at the top of the ticket in the United States. It became something very, very problematic for the vice president to think about that as a national ticket. What I would say is, relative to that, I think that in some ways I would have been more worried, quite honestly, Bruce, about Pete Buttigieg's qualifications. Only having been the mayor of a small town in Indiana, Obviously he had a military background when he served in Afghanistan, but he was not long on politics in general. Of course, he was also the Secretary of Transportation, but that only came after the fact.
It did.
Yeah. So in the 2020 election, Pete was very much a neophyte at that time in terms of going up, into that. But no, excuse me, it was after. He had been the Secretary of Transportation before he ran.
Under Biden.
Under Biden, right, before he ran in 2020.
Ideologically, he may have been a good candidate, but he didn't have, in many people's eyes, the credentials.
Yeah.
But your point is, that he didn't have the credentials in many people's eyes, that he was a gay man. And that's what she says in the book. Yeah. She said that asking the U.S. electorate to accept a ticket featuring a black woman and a gay man was simply too big of a risk. But what's really interesting here is that Harris says that Pete knew about our mutual sadness. Well, she and Pete Buttigieg are apparently on different pages, because he says that voters prioritize a candidate's potential impact on their lives and not their identity. So in sorting out Buttigieg's argument, are his election record and Barack Obama's evidence of that?
Yeah, I think that Kamala Harris is living. I think that her view is being framed by an America which isn't quite as acutely conservative as maybe the time that she was coming along politically. I think you would actually have heard more commentary on Pete Buttigieg's readiness to be the president of the United States than you ever would about his sexual orientation or who his husband was or what was going on in his own personal life. I think he would have been looked at as somebody who was, again, very, very young, somebody whose record while he was the Secretary of Transportation would have been questioned, all right? A lot of our natural responses to issues that we were having with the FAA, with the rail situation, Bruce, if you remember, we had a period of time where we had several high-profile train cars which were derailed in the United States. The Secretary was criticized for how long it took him to go to the scene, what the response was of his agency. I think you would have had a lot more focus on his actual career than what you would have had on people just coming out publicly and saying things. Now, would that support? Let's not be naive. Where there have been under the conversation. Under the level back talk about his sexual preferences. Of course there would have been. I mean, that would have been but I don't think it would have been any more presumptive than the way America had a conversation about electing our first black president, or about not electing Hillary Clinton for being our first female president. Hillary Clinton, to this day, I do not believe that she wasn't elected president of the United States because she was a female. I think she was a decidedly unpopular candidate at the wrong time to run. And I think the same thing would have been the case.
It would have been an issue, but not necessarily the main issue.
That is correct. That is correct.
So the other person under consideration was Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania's governor, who, as perhaps a person who can govern, is somebody who does have the credentials. He was seriously under consideration. She thought he was poised, he was polished, and he was personable. But was that what she was really saying? I don't think so. I think she was saying that he was too ambitious for her.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk going around at the time, which appears to have really been validated now with this book, and of course in the months to which we have followed since the election. They were terrified that Shapiro would be somebody who would outshine Kamala Harris.
There's no doubt.
And
he would have.
He would have. If you look at Governor Walz now, if you look at Tim Walz, and he just has, in terms of, I'm not talking about his policies here for a second, Bruce, where he came from. Right. Just in terms of his affect, he has a certain disarming approach that voters really gravitated to, and they talked with. He was somebody who could just shoot the bull with you at a water cooler and do so in a way where it didn't look like he literally had just come out of a focus group of 35 consultants telling him exactly what to say.
He's more relatable.
Relatable, authentic to himself, okay? Whether you like Governor Walz or whether you don't like Governor Walz, there was an authenticity there, a relatability, as you suggest, which is something that, I'm sorry, Vice President Harris today, with the majority of voters, just never had. I think the other thing to take a quick step back before we move on from Buttigieg as well, which was an interesting calculation. If you're assuming that everything about Vice President Buttigieg would have been a liability because of the fact he's gay, let's also think about what that would have potentially brought to the ticket, with many Americans in the LGBT community being very enthusiastic that we would have our first gay vice president. I think that's the other part of the thing. But here's what it comes down to, Bruce. Is there enough of a coalition there when you're looking to get elected president of the United States? Would have going that direction earned Kamala Harris any votes she would not have gotten anyway?
When you look at who did and did not go to the polls, I think the answer is no.
Right, not in this particular case. Another case which was brought up in the book, however, was Palestine. That was a very, very different scenario in terms of honoring what the Biden administration was doing, and even as Israel's response was getting more and more and more unpopular within the Democratic base and with independent voters at large, the refusal of the Harris administration to come out and condemn Palestine, she underplays it in this book. she's not listening to polls, and she's not listening to people, and she's not listening to the right advice.
Well, for the longest time, there were people who said that Kamala Harris isn't addressing issues at all.
Well, that's very true. Yeah, she just dodges the issue.
Right.
And again, what's your campaign strategy there in this limited amount of time? Just don't be Donald Trump.
Right.
Don't go out, don't tell gaffes, don't tell vulgar jokes, don't offend anybody. Just present yourself. Yeah.
Don't be somebody different than Joe Biden.
I mean, we forget, Bruce, because it seems like it's been an eternity ago, that in Harris's only debate with Donald Trump, she couldn't even score punches because of what Donald Trump was saying to himself. This was the debate where he literally said that Haitians living in Springfield, Ohio, were eating the dogs and cats. Were eating the dogs and cats of their neighbors.
Yeah.
Like, what do you say if you're the vice president in a debate like that? Just keep talking, please?
She didn't hold her own.
Yeah,
that's what she was criticized for.
Yeah, just keep talking. I mean, so at any rate, very, very challenging situation to be put in relative to Shapiro. In terms of political legs moving forward, I think Shapiro and Buttigieg are both people you're going to see come back in the party. Pete Buttigieg, I can promise you, has no designs of going away. He is going to be a stalwart within the party.
Josh Shapiro.
And Josh Shapiro is going to be the exact same way. I could see these two on a collision course for leadership of the party moving forward. Politically, they're very similar.
Yeah, but the Dems, and again, this has nothing to do with the book, they're not harnessing that power right now. And for whatever reason, I don't understand why.
Yeah, well, then the other question is, too, is if there was, relative to, and this is back on your topic for the book, if there was a popularity to Tim Walz, why are you not harnessing it? Why are you not saying, this is the guy I picked, don't you think he's fabulous?
I'll tell you why I don't think so. And you know, Harris does make this point in the book. I think it's because they see that she settled for him. And there were some big-time fumbles by Walz on the campaign trail that she saw.
He made some gaffes.
He did make some gaffes.
He made some gaffes. But I mean, my goodness, relative to whom? Joe Biden? I mean, let's keep it real here for a second.
Yeah, perspective is a wonderful thing. Yeah. Do you think she made a mistake with Tim Walz?
No, I don't think so. But looking back, I don't think that, historically the vice president of the United States makes that huge of a difference. You have to
look. Which is what we talked about before.
Yeah, which is what we talked about
Doesn't
before.
make or break a ticket.
You got to look. I mean, there are some cases where it certainly has hurt it. Sarah Palin did not help John McCain at the end of the day.
No, I think John McCain may have been more electable had it not been for Sarah Palin.
Yeah, I think that's the case, too.
But his arm was twisted, too.
It was. I mean, looking back reflectively, John McCain, what could he have done to have done better? That was a landslide Obama election,
right,
and what was a transformational year in American politics. The election of our first African-American president with a funny-sounding name coming after 9/11, breaking through that kind of huge glass ceiling. Who would John McCain have put on the ticket reflectively? Maybe he would have gone with a Democrat and tried to create some sort of and there was rumors there for a while, wasn't he close to the former senator from Connecticut?
Yes, he was.
Joe Lieberman, somebody like that he could potentially put.
He was running as a libertarian, wasn't he?
I think he was, but he was somebody that he could have partnered with. But what's going to stop that? I mean, that is literally the Obama tsunami, is what that was. And there was nothing that was going to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of mistakes, whether or not Tim Walz is something that is arguable. Kamala Harris made mistakes of her own. There are other things in the book that Harris is very candid about, like the hand grenade moment that was on The View. It's when she was asked if she would do anything differently than the president, Biden, and she answered, "Not that I could think of." Man, did that blow up in her face.
You've been somebody's vice president for 3.5 years through COVID. You've had a variety of the problems that the United States had experienced, some out of the control of the president. Others, we could say that President Biden should have done a better job. And your answer of 3.5 years of being in government is that you couldn't think of anything that you would do differently?
Because nothing else. It shows that she's not her own person.
Well, no, that just shows right there the handcuffs that she was operating under through most of this. The whole idea of being terrified. And by the way, let's look at this. I mean, you look at the final vote tally. She lost 10 billion voters that Biden had. Okay, Trump barely gained any. He had his core from 2000, which went on to 2004. She was the one hemorrhaging voters at a time that she could have been blazing her own path, and she could have been separating herself from Biden.
You can maintain the party line, but still differentiate yourself.
It was such an awkward situation, Bruce. It was such an awkward situation. Just the whole idea, too, which isn't really talked about as much, living in a state like Florida, where you are told who your Democratic primary candidate is going to be because the party picked it for you. I mean, that is something to me today when the Florida Democratic Party is walking around thinking, why can't we bring people back to the Democratic fold? Y'all canceled a primary. There was other names on there. You just told Democrats in Florida, Biden is your guy. And then you told people again, oh, Harris is your presidential candidate now, too. No brokered convention. No talk about expanding it out any further. Denial all the way to the end of the campaign by the Biden family that there was anything really preventing Joe Biden from running. It's hard to have, sympathy for Harris, but man, it was a perfect storm of problems that she was confronting during the campaign.
I miss the old
And to your
days.
point, some of her own making.
Yes.
If
More than some.
If you're not ready to answer in an interview, where would you have improved upon from your predecessor? Even if you think your predecessor was a heck of a guy, a great American and most qualified president we've ever had, where would you have improved upon, or what would you have done differently? If you can't come up with something off your top, then that is a hand grenade, Bruce. That is that is something that it just proves how little thought she actually put into that process.
Yeah. This is going to sound weird, but the 2 assassination attempts against President Trump impacted the presidential campaign. But what's interesting is her take on Donald Trump. So they had a private conversation before their debate, and she called him disarmingly flattering. So if you've ever met Donald Trump privately versus what you see the bombastic Trump on TV and in certain settings, you would understand. That's a bizarre twist. Or is it? Is that typical Trump to try and catch her off guard?
I don't think so, Bruce. Trump trying to catch somebody off guard, I don't know how effective that would be, but I do think from everything that I've heard, and you might know better than I've never met Donald Trump or interviewed Donald Trump, but from people that are close to him, once the camera is even off and he's just alone with you privately, he's a charming guy.
But that's my point.
I would argue that there's an authenticity to it, because just to have people for all of these years now. Listen, once you stop serving President Trump, you're in Elon Muskville. Okay, you're gone. You are gone. You are in Hope Hicksville, gone from government. I mean, think about the people in the first administration, Bruce, who will never be heard from again in American politics. Okay, that being said, once you're in Trump's inner circle, or I'm sure that once you're a bride and groom getting married at Mar-a-Lago, or you're entertaining guests, Donald Trump interpersonally is a very, very charming, off-putting individual.
That's what I've heard.
I don't doubt that for the least. But why she would be surprised? Listen, this is the same. These aren't doctored photos. This is not AI. This is the era before AI of Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and Michael Bloomberg and Bush playing golf together. You know, yes, it might be a charity event, but you're not going to play 18 rounds of golf with somebody who for 4 hours you just loathe. You're going to be talking about things. You're going to be enjoying their company. The Clintons going to Donald and Melania's wedding. Okay, this is clearly a man who had an interpersonal skill set that, one, is he's gotten exposed on a larger theater. 2, he's the president of the United States, okay, which is huge. I mean, one of the things I cringe about with today's Gen Z generation is that if they're looking at Donald Trump, they're looking at, that's the only president they may have ever had. And they're thinking that laying up in bed until 3 o'clock in the morning tweeting is normal behavior, okay? But beyond that, to your point, you know, he's a charming guy. I'm sure that he wished her well. I think back to when Donald Trump went into the White House and there was like all kinds of consternation. Why'd she break the rules? You remember Melania took Michelle Obama a present, a gift.
Yeah.
When they walked in. I think there is, it may be strange, I think there is a genuineness to them. There can be a genuineness. And I just don't think you get to see it a lot because of, and by the way, Trump invites the chaos that he creates. It's his brand. So,
well, he loves the chaos. Oh, and I forget the setting. There was he and Barack Obama were in a setting, and the two of them were laughing and joking.
Oh, wasn't it? I think it was at the viewing for the late President Carter.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
It was at Jimmy Carter's funeral, and they sat together and they laughed and joked together. Yeah, so, you know, I mean, he's not somebody who's not, you can't intercommunicate with interpersonally.
Right. Well,
yeah.
we forget that they're real people.
Well, not just a real person. This is somebody who hosted Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
This is somebody who's in a Home Alone movie. This is clearly this is clearly a known commodity of Hollywood and of entertainment, right?
Yeah.
He hosted
in many ways he's an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all have a role to play.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, let's get back to the fundamental question here. The purpose of the book, beyond
making money.
Making the money.
Yeah.
The intent. Kamala Harris's intent. You have to believe the Dems didn't want to reopen the can of worms that were opened here. They didn't want to revisit a lot of these issues. Did Kamala Harris want to settle a score and snub her nose at politics? Some people thought maybe. Members of her inner circle say nope. But why burn the bridges that she did?
I think
she did burn a bunch of bridges.
Sure. One, the timing of burning the bridges is excellent, to be quite frank.
Because it's so far out.
So far out from the midterms.
So far out from the mid and the presidential election.
Correct. If you got a grievance, if you got something you want to get off your chest, if you feel like in some way that your legacy has been wronged, if you feel like you've been a lifelong Democrat and that you've served your party well and that you did everything you possibly could, you got thrown into a bad situation by the former president, okay? all of the things that we've just discussed here on the show, and you want to have an opportunity for you to present your grievances to your supporters or to other people in the Democratic Party apparatus who have been around, now is the time to put that information out.
Because people have short minds.
We have short minds. And by the way, we're having this conversation about the book. This book hasn't exactly lit up the news cycle, has it?
No.
I mean, I hate to say that, it really hasn't.
It's going to be on the discount shelves.
Yeah, and with every single day in Trump world, from what's going on right now still in the Middle East, with epic mass shootings that we've had, death of talk show hosts or podcast hosts, this news cycle is just always moving in a way that I just don't think that Kamala Harris is even going to get the traction for this book that she was hoping to get, So dozens of copies available at your local Books A Million, I guess. But this would be the time politically for her to get it out. I would suspect, Bruce, I can't imagine what kind of political future she thinks she has at this point.
I don't know.
I don't know. Versus that new stable of people, the Shapiros and Buttigieg that we've talked about, other individuals who are going to be getting into the fray.
Stronger.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're hearing about AOC, you're talking about other people who want the Democratic Party to turn over, to become more progressive. I'm not so sure Governor Walz himself has not done. He's indicated a willingness if people want him to serve. But can I tell you, Bruce, that right there is, I think, the Tim Walz piece of exceptionalism. I think when Tim, and I try not to be naive, I think when Tim Walz says, I really want to see if people want me to run, he believes it.
Well, he's been front and center on this whole budget debate.
And if people don't want him to run, Tim Walz won't run. He's just the kind of guy who can go back and coach junior high football and not care. And
which is his roots.
And that's also, I think, why there's, that authenticity that some people see. Other people see a gaffe-prone guy who's not well-rehearsed enough, who's not ready for the stage. Others see somebody who...
Well, that's just because he's a normal...
A normal dude. A normal dude.
He's a football coach.
Yep.
So there's a book. It's called The Washington Book of How to Read Politics and Politicians, written by Carlos Lozada. He says the whole purpose of Kamala Harris writing the book is, it's not my fault. Losing the 2024 election is not my fault. And he thinks that she's after the one big job she hasn't gotten yet. Whether or not she's going to get it is academic.
Yeah, I mean,
that's her purpose in writing the book. It's not my fault, so I'm clearing the air.
Oh, yeah.
What happened in that campaign?
Yeah.
Don't blame me.
Yeah. So I'm going to reintroduce myself as what? The candidate that ran in 2020 and couldn't make Iowa? I mean, I don't know where that goes at that point. If you're a Democrat out there and you're...
I think she's just wiping her hands of it.
It could be, but I mean, the author is suggesting that she may be interested in having a greater political career, to your point, and running for the office that just escaped her. Obviously, those were terrible circumstances in which she ran, but I think if you're the Democratic Party, man, you gotta move on. You gotta look at this and you gotta say, hey, listen, we just lost to a guy that we were able to defeat in 2020. We were, according to the book, by the way, she was stunned. On election night, she believed, I mean, there was champagne on ice ready to go because they were confident that she was going to beat Donald Trump until she didn't in that election. Very reminiscent of the 16 campaign with Clinton, however.
Let me ask the question this way.
Yeah.
Were people stunned that Kamala Harris didn't win, or were people stunned that Donald Trump won again?
Well, I think it's both. Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's the same question, but...
Yeah, I think the first one is more shocking if you're on Team Harris. The second one in my mind is more contemplative. How did we get here that Donald Trump is winning another election? What did we not learn over these last 4 years that he was out of office that we somehow now have the conditions here again that he's back into office? And Bruce, that in my mind becomes what Democrats should be focusing on nationally in 2026 and 2028.
But they're not.
They're not. It's not just about, and if I had a quarter for every time I hear this, Democrats saying, well, we're gonna restore things and go back before the Trump, and we're gonna restore our politics. That's what brought you Trump. You were doing something ineffectual that created a culture in the United States that Donald Trump became attractive to people. And we've discussed at length the decrease in the working class voter, the alienation from people who are less educated, basically blowing off rural America, which is pretty much where the Democratic Party has been at this point. There are all kinds of constituencies, Bruce, that all the way back to 2015 made the election ripe for Donald Trump to beat Hillary Clinton. And if you can tell me, honestly, what they've done to mend or correct these relationships, I only see a Democratic Party which is increasingly interested in upper middle class, educated people and their donors. And that's it. That is their entire core constituency, and Bruce, you can't win national elections that way, man.
And look, when you and I are having this conversation right now, we still don't know what's going to happen with the government shutdown. Democrats are saying, look, there's health care at stake, there's this at stake, and we're standing on principle. But if the government shuts down, what's going to happen? The Republicans are going to say, well, it's not our fault.
I'm not afraid to go out on a limb here, Bruce, because we don't know what's going to happen.
We don't know what's going to happen.
But I would bet you that Schumer is going to fold like a cheap suit, and that Chuck Schumer will get a handful of Democrats once again, push for bipartisanship, sign it, say we can't do this to the American people, we can't close government with the American people, and he will do it again.
But I think I'm asking, if they don't, then does that become a big campaign issue where, well, government shut down, it's the Dems' fault?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could, but again, that's so far out.
Yeah.
We're still looking at another
people
year
forget.
out. Yeah, and the other thing too,
because the longest federal shutdown was 35 days. But the thing that may be different this go round is that there's the threat of massive layoffs,
Sure.
which may happen regardless, given Donald Trump's history.
Right. But here's the other thing too, because we know that this happens this way. Donald Trump doesn't like to be unpopular. And the cries would start to go out of people who weren't getting paychecks and people who weren't able to go on family vacations and people who had their vacations booked to their favorite national park. And all of that stuff starts to ratchet. You will then see Donald Trump not want to be associated with it.
Right.
And that is also very typical of Donald Trump. Just look at all the tariffs he was going to impose on all these countries and then how he walked them back and finagled them. And negotiated them up and down because he basically just put his finger here and decided which way the political wind was blowing and what was going to be popular or not. And the advantage that Donald Trump has right now is that if he tells Speaker Johnson to jump in the Capitol Hill, Johnson will not even ask him how high. He'll just jump as how he can because that's the nature and the power that Donald Trump has over the Republican Party. So who would it hurt more? I don't know, but I don't think Schumer's going to let that go, man. I think we've talked about Chuck Schumer at length on this program in the past. I think he is a creature and a throwback to a different Washington, D.C. that no longer exists. And, if you think about this for a second, I watched J.D. Vance go out this morning and tell the American people, it's unconscionable that anybody in this government would vote to close the government and not make sure our soldiers got paid. Now, Bruce, last year at this time, J.D. Vance was voting to close our government, okay? There's not even a sign there of any kind of humility, any kind of hubris.
Well, he's a shapeshifter anyway.
Just a shapeshifter, but they're all shapeshifters, man. That's
they
where
worry
we're
about
at.
their own skin.
Yeah.
Okay, and all of this may be academic because I think in the end, when it comes to the presidential election, number one, unless something unconstitutional happens, Donald Trump's not going to be a factor. Go back to James Carville all those many years ago. I think the economy is suffering right now. It may come down to the fact, like James Carville said, it's the economy, stupid, that determines the election.
That, and also, Bruce, I think the other thing which is increasingly to me, and I don't want to, this is not conspiratorial, this is just my observation, is Donald Trump able to finish this term? Because I think that that's something that people are going to become increasingly focused on. As Donald Trump approaches 80, and I know for a lot of your viewers out there, they may not follow President Trump on Truth Social or any of his social media antics, but as somebody who does, they've been getting increasingly chaotic in the last few weeks. Things that just do not make any sense. I mean, even sense for Donald Trump. And if that starts to articulate its way out into White House press briefings and into the public, it makes one wonder, will Donald Trump be able to function for the next 3 years?
Which is why I think that J.D. Vance is more front and center on a lot of the issues.
Yeah, I think he should be. I think J.D. Vance is, at this point right now, I think J.D. Vance is almost a more effective politician than Donald Trump is.
I'm sure you'll let us know what you think. Appreciate your watching Politics and Power.
See why every day more people are choosing News4JAX, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.